project planning report and submit to the IEPA by March of 2025. Next slide, please. So we really appreciate that you've taken the time to let us speak. And if you guys have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Abby. Before we open it up for questions, I would share that a majority of these projects we have seen pop their little heads up multiple times, whether it's the Route 24 relocation, well number 13 need, many of the water main breaks in the southeast area. We lost water to Sunnyland either last year or the year before. So each one of these has come sadly to our attention based off of an issue that has arisen in the past. So we do ask, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Any questions?
Mayor,
Mr. Blundy.
so can you tell me a little bit more about how the state revolving fund, how that works? Because I think what I heard here is that there's a rate study underway already. So I'm not sure, you know, it says here we need to kind of determine what projects we wish to include in the rate study, but it sounds like it's already underway, so I'm not sure how all this comes together.
So the rate study has started really just to establish the baseline conditions right now, what your rates are, what your current costs and projects are to make water. And then from here, we're gonna take these projects and talk with staff and get feedback from you guys to decide which projects we wanna prioritize, which ones you wanna try to fund with your own reserves, or which ones you wanna try to combine together under a single loan or bond. So through the rate study, we'll be able to give you guys some alternatives of, well, if we combine these two, this is what it looks like. If we work on this one, this is what it's gonna look like on your rate study, so that you guys can help evaluate and better determine how you wanna utilize your funds going forward.
So, I mean, does the rate study then, does it include all these projects today, and then we can talk about which ones to weed out and see what that does to it, or?
So really, if we showed all projects in the rate study today and trying to fund them tomorrow, obviously the increases would be too much. So really what we want to do is prioritize these projects and look to combine some and then also delay some and look at out years in the 20-year planning window that those projects would be undertaken.
Okay, so the state revolving fund loan, then, is that a 20-year loan, or how does that work?
So the state revolving loan fund, to start the process off, you've got to get project planning approval for your projects. Just because you got project planning approval doesn't mean that it guarantees you a loan. All it does is put you in line for applying for a loan or applying for funding. So the very first step is to get this project planning done. Through that, we want to make sure that you guys prioritize your projects and understand what the costs of those projects and impacts are. But then once the IEPA sees that you've got a project, you apply for funding after the project plan is approved, then they will rank you amongst all other communities that are looking for funding on their water system. And that ranking is based on need, some population, like poverty levels and other demographics. And that will rank your projects as others and determine how much funding you can get through them and when you can get funding with them. And they go through that every year. So once that's approved, then they start the loan process from there. So the funds themselves are usually lower rates than you'll see anywhere else. Right now they're currently funding around 2% or less for their loans. And they do offer 20 and 30-year terms depending on the projects. Obviously, if they go above the 20-year threshold, the project has to have an extended life expectancy. Water mains and things like that have 50 to 100-year life expectancies are things that they would consider versus electrical components and things like that they want to see in a smaller time frame. Did I get your question answered there? I know there's a lot of information.
Yeah, that was helpful for me, yeah, sure.
Okay.
And so I guess, Dennis, I mean, is there any direction or guidance from staff on what is priority here?
Well, I believe probably our biggest priority coming up with IDOT looking at Route 24 is going to be squarely on that project itself. I know it's a very large project, but that one is going to be on our doorstep quicker than we would like. So I would say staff's number one priority would likely be the Route 24 water main relocation with the ISO, and our water storage needs. Water Tower 3 is going to be up there.
So if you had to pick, you'd say those two, I guess, or 1 and 2.
I'd say that, and the Sunnyland water service redundancy is probably up there as well. I mean, it's a little tough to kind of put it on one or the other. I mean,
And I will note, you know, Dennis said that it'll be upon you quickly, these needs. The SRF funding process is very lengthy. Once we submit our project plan, it's gonna be at least 6 months before the IEPA approves that project plan. And then you have to wait until the March 31st. So truly, you probably would not be able to see funding for a project come through until July of 2026. So that's why we always talk to our clients and communities about staying in front of these projects and making sure that you're planning ahead and getting your documents in and your planning in. So once the project plan is approved, it's good for 5 years. So you can work off that same plan for 5 years. And that's why we also can recommend that you include a list of projects like this and try to schedule them in that or even outside that planning period all the way out to 20 years. Because as long as it's included in your project plan, you can follow up within that 5-year period and look to get funding for it without that delay.
So if we put something in our project plan, are we committed to it if we go to that loan, to that
No.
loan process?
You're not.
So what would be the downside of putting everything in that?
We would strongly recommend that you do put everything in it, but I think through the plan itself, we've got to show funding and show the IEPA how you plan to fund those projects. And that's really where the prioritization comes in. So all of these projects would be included in the project plan. What we're really looking at taking on the next step is prioritizing which one comes first and in what years you're going to fund those, because that's really what affects your rates and the impacts on your water users going forward, along with, what funding source you plan on using.
So I guess that leaves me, I guess I don't know how to prioritize this other than, I agree, I think the Route 24 one's probably important, but the rest of them, I don't know unless they know, kind of what that means to us, what it means to our rates, or other, if we have to issue a bond or whatever. How do we get to a point where we know what that means so we can kind of help try to prioritize this?
I think really, ultimately, yes. I mean, the rate study component is gonna, finalize that recommendations in your guys' mind. I think we will work with staff and any feedback that you guys get to run an initial round of prioritization of the projects and the funding opportunities. And then we'll probably have 1 or 2 alternatives that we can bring to you that you can look at and decide how you could fund the projects or delay the projects. And what obviously those impacts are of, all of these projects, get more expensive as time goes on, but you also incur more risk and more maintenance and repair, as you go. So just kind of weighing those versus the impacts overall. It's certainly not an easy process for you guys.
Yeah, so when will we have that rate study?
We're working with them now. We said that they'd be complete by February. We're certainly trying to aggressively push that forward. February, and we can talk to Raftellus to see if we can have a presentation before then of some alternatives for you guys to consider before the study is finalized, for sure.
So can I take it then we have until February to prioritize this list?
I think we would like to see some prioritization in it, or even maybe some discussion of, this one's a little smaller, let's try to fund that out of reserves. But ultimately, we're just gonna work off the feedback that you guys have and make the next steps, but wanted to make sure that you guys had a full background of the projects before we complicated it a lot with discussing impacts and rates and things like that, so.
Okay. Well, I mean, Dennis, I don't know if you're looking for our feedback tonight, but I mean, I guess I'm not sure how to rank these or prioritize anything here tonight.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, so, this is a lot of stuff, and while I'm trying to digest it and, really looking at it, obviously, I think that the 24 project is gonna be in our face before we know it. I'm assuming the resurfacing is by us a little bit of time, Dennis, but I obviously think that's probably high priority, on this, especially the cost and everything. And then, when I look at like the southeast area water main improvements, from my perspective, I'm looking that, again, another huge cost. But is that something we're gonna overlay with, you know, some of our road maintenance and stuff like that? I know that's obviously those kind of things go hand in hand. If we're ripping up a road, we might as well take it all at one point, and we go forward and trying to include, you know, like that's when we take each bite of those little sections, because that's kind of my thought process. And a lot of these I look at as life safety issues. You know, obviously Sunnyland's water redundancy, while that's a lot cheaper bill, you know, it's still nearly $1 million. I think the one for this next to the school is a huge issue. You know, again, life safety issue. One of those mains, you know, that if it's a 4-inch main, it'd be nice to get, you know, a bigger main in there to have for any type of, you know, issue of a fire or anything, evacuation. And it's kind of like one of those things, we know it's a problem. I think it's something, again, that's one of the cheapest ones to tackle. And then as far as the water tower 3 and the well pump, again, I would go Route 24 as priority 1. Probably the water tower is actually number 2. And I say that because, again, when I'm looking at life safety and we want to continue to have development and offer opportunities to businesses here in town, especially in those areas, we need to have that life safety aspect, in my opinion, so that we can provide them with adequate ISO ratings for fire flow, because I'm assuming most of those larger buildings would be sprinklered and anything of that nature. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And again, those 2 projects that, you know, 24 is gonna be a big one. I don't even care about critical length versus total length. I think it's gonna be ripped open. I think that's when we try to figure out how we can get it funded all together, because I don't think you're gonna see another opportunity like this to not disturb that stretch of road. And we know there's problems. You guys are out there in the wintertime. We've all seen it. There's not a resident here that hasn't complained about that road. And, you know, with that critical area being priority, you know, even with this new layer of new asphalt that looks really pretty, it's great until we have to tear it back up again because we have a broken water main. So, again, I'm just looking for complaints to come headed our way again because of that. So we know it's an issue. So I appreciate this very much. It is a lot to digest. There's a lot of dollar signs with it. But in my opinion, that Route 24 is big. And then again, with the water tower, that's huge for us to help businesses and provide development opportunities, because if we want those type of businesses here, we need to have adequate water flow and stuff like that. So to me, that becomes a high priority to expanding us, and that also helps, you know, drive revenue. And then obviously we saw with having to run on when 11 and 12 went down, running on 10 was not really great for a lot of residents, and we got a lot of backplus on that. So I don't think there's anything here that we haven't seen that's not a priority. And it's not like you guys aren't doing it and you're not aware of it. So I really appreciate you guys working with them, and I know you're looking for direction, and I'm kind of splattering everything. But I think these are all stuff that we really need to have an eye on the ball. And like I said, if they're the smaller expense ones or something, we can figure out how to fund with what we have. I mean, I know that that's hard to say because it seems like we're, you know, not addressing big ones right away, but again, we have to take a bite of this, and it's a big apple, so we gotta take a bite when we can. That's just my opinion.
I guess with that, some of these smaller projects, the southeast area water main improvements, I mean, those are absolutely, we already kind of have those in our budget right now as we're kind of doing hopscotching with the road reconstructions. Something like the Von Durant Street water main replacement, that might be something we might be able to squeeze into a budget even in our current status. I know we've got some staff that is really chomping at the bit to do some larger projects like this, and so this might be something that we can kind of whet their appetite with. I don't want to speak for Brian, but this is that's definitely a one block stretch that is, as much as it's close to the school, doing something like that in the summer might be something our guys might be able to take care of. The Route 24 water main project would be one that we would absolutely want to consider as the state revolving loan program. That is a very large project, as well as the water tower, number 3. Well, number 13, well, I mean, would have been great to have it here in the last 2 months. We ran on 11 and 12 for quite a while without really too big hiccups. I think that's more development driven. If we grow to the point where we need that additional 500,000 gallons per day, I think that's when well number 13 would kick in. And then looking at the Sunnyland water service redundancy, we did have to put them on a boil order, but then lost water completely altogether. But that's another project that we might be able to save up a couple of years and then get it kind of pushed. So I don't know if I would fall necessarily into the revolving loan program. That is definitely something we should be budgeting for to get taken care of.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Brownfield.
Thank you. I agree with the Route 24 being the main priority. It's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be here quicker than we think. As far as Water Tower 3, definitely number 2 in my book, followed by the well. I think we need to try and do the low-hanging fruit ourselves, just like Dennis just recommended. The Von Durant one concerns me because are most of the breaks on the main, and then once we get that fixed, that's when they blow the bottom run. Isn't that normally how that happens?
It has happened like that in the past. The problem, what we're concerned about is if they have to cancel school the next day and going through that, trying to, the school's trying to figure out if they're gonna be on a boil order, if they gotta cancel, we're trying to get it fixed.
Right.
It is something that's a smaller project that I think we can maybe do in-house.
And we'll have it set up for when we do the 24, it could just hook right in. We wouldn't have to redo that again, correct?
I guess
Should
it
have
would all
to.
depend on when 24.
Right. And the Sunnyland, that just, it floors me. I didn't realize we didn't have redundancy on that, so I thought we always had agreement with either Northern Tazewell or somebody, but I guess not. It'd be mixing 2 different plans, so I'm in favor of going forward with that as soon as we can, so that's just my thought. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Mr. Martin.
I just have a quick question on the southeast area. Are these possible, are these able to be done all in-house, or would these need to be bid too? If we did these in small projects, is something we could do in-house?
A lot of what we've been doing, so like as we're reconstructing Catherine Street, those 2 blocks of water main, that would be kind of this southeast water main replacement project. So as we were doing those road reconstruction projects, we would just include the water main as part of it as well.
That's part of the bid.
Yeah.
Right.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Stevens.
So according to these numbers, we have 5,400 customers. Is that an accurate number? Or does this count, is this, for the rate study, this is the number that's gonna be used? And what about the Washington Estates water customers, the Illinois American water customers? I thought we were already, I thought they were already on board with city water.
They are. This presentation that they put together in these projects were put together before we picked them up as a customer.
And so with this rate study, how does that work? Because if I remember correctly, we're not, Illinois American Water they charge a certain number, like per connection or something, not per customer. So will that be factored into this rate study? Like, because I understand the water customers are the people that are gonna have to pay for this, right?
So they do pay a connection fee. They'll pay a second one once we get the second interconnect. But they pay the same water rate as what is established in the ordinance. So if our water rate goes up, Illinois American will pay us that same water rate.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, please.
Mr.
Just
Butler.
an easy question for Dennis. The relocation on Route 24, do you anticipate a need for relocating any sanitary sewer? I really don't know where that's located.
We have small runs in that area. I don't think we would need to do much for sanitary sewer relocation at this time. I think we could likely line most of it if we need to, but that might be a question for Brian.
Yeah, I don't think sewer's as much as a concern as like water main. If there's any issues, typically you can fix them pretty easily, or like in the set you can line.
Good, thank you.
Okay, I think Dennis, I think the charge of staff is to come back and bring us some type of schedule that we can have for the committee of the whole in December. What you heard tonight, I think you got enough input. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yes, I think we got the direction we need.
Okay, anyone else before we leave the subject? Thank you so much for the presentation. Thanks for being here. On to item B, the Hanks Foundation Amphitheater Feasibility Study presentation. Jim Hanks is a 1971 graduate of Washington Community High School. Went on to Eureka College, became very successful, got his doctorate degree at USC. Had a pharmaceutical company that sold and did quite well, and unfortunately lost his wife, Dee, and would like to gift the city of Washington an amphitheater, anywhere from $10 to $12 million facility. He and his wife enjoyed when they lived in Buffalo, New York, the amphitheater there. They liked to get the bottle of wine and the cheese and crackers and sit on the lawn to watch concerts, and it's just something he was fond of and they enjoyed. So I'm not sure who's going to start the presentation tonight, but we're willing to listen.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council and staff, of course. Chief McCoy, thank you for your service. On Veterans Day, I'd like to just acknowledge Councilman Bobby Martin and anyone else in this room who has served in our armed forces. Thank you for your service. 1,300 miles from where we're sitting right now, there's a wonderful man in his workshop this month, carving by hand a wooden replica of the Washington Square. He loves his hometown, has never stopped loving it. He grew up here and he went on to school at USC, as the mayor had mentioned. He entered the business world, bought a company, was blessed with very good fortune, sold the company, married the love of his life, and boy, did they love music, and they loved their hometown. Next slide, Jana, please. Jim and Dee Hanks. In her last years of life, she posted on Facebook that happiness is really listening to music with friends, and also that she would never forget her growing up, a friend she made, and the experiences she had here in Washington. And there's a picture in the bottom of Darien Lakes where they spent a lot of time out on that lawn, Mayor, listening to concerts. And she passed in 2021. And Jim decided to honor his life and her life with a concert venue in her name and in doing so, give back to their beloved hometown. He wanted to establish more than a concert venue. This is a meeting place for the performing arts and for people in the community. He wanted to establish a gift that would keep on giving for generations. He wanted to elevate the cultural landscape to new heights here in the city of Washington. So the first thing he did, the very first thing he did, was call Mayor Menier. And shortly thereafter, he said, we need a foundation. I want this to live on far beyond our years. So they called Bob Brown on the square, and he formed a foundation. They called Clifton Larson Allen, Sam Sigelnik and company to watch over the funds. And they called Matt Maley at Washington Community Bank to be a guardian and to advise. Jim Hanks had a trusted friend in the former general counsel of Caterpillar Tractor. His name is Rennie Atterbury. They served on the Eureka College board together. Rennie is a philanthropist, and his stamp is on the Peoria Riverfront Museum, the Peoria Civic Center, the Peoria Symphony Orchestra. He has given more and has been on the cutting edge of so many wonderful things that have lived on, that serve this community. Rennie serves as president of this board, and the Hanks Foundation is absolutely committed to a very long-standing relationship in this community, serving the needs of this community, and has committed every penny of proceeds from this venue to be reinvested back into the community of Washington. It's a tremendous mission, and I'm very, very proud to represent Rennie and this foundation. One of the first things the foundation did was contact Terra Engineering, who had a great relationship here in Washington on the Nofsinger project. The second call was to Core Construction, Wayne Baum and Tim Erickson, and our project manager, Caleb Weiss, is here tonight. Terra has brought with us their executive vice president, George Garib, and their landscape architect, Kevin Graham, who you'll meet in just a little while. That's a lot of talent sitting over there in that front row. A lot of talent. Then what we did was we contacted a very talented young man named Nick Leroy, and here's why. Nick is a great dad. He's a terrific gentleman from Central Illinois. He, over 15 years, has booked thousands of acts in venues in 4 states. Last year alone, he booked 530 acts in 4 states. He's going to be a tremendous asset to us as we attack the challenge of why another venue in the city of Washington, and how 5 Points, the Performing Arts Center here, and the other venue over across the way can actually be partners and complement one another, generate new business, new memberships, new subscriptions, and a whole lot of interest in the Washington area. We thank Nick for that, and I'm going to ask you if you would help me welcome a Washingtonian who grew up at 209 South Main Street here in Washington. And he is now the Director of Architecture and Landscape at Epstein Global in Chicago. This young man really made it. He made it in his field. I couldn't be prouder to introduce our narrator for the evening, our moderator, and a terrific gentleman, a Washingtonian through and through, Ed Curley. Ed?
Thank you, Nick. Good evening, Council. Again, my name is Ed Curley. I'm a Vice President and the Director of Architecture and Interiors at Epstein. Next slide, please. Epstein's a 103-year-old architecture, engineering, and construction firm. for that entire time we've been headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. We're a global design and engineering firm with projects that span across the globe. On the screen here, you see just a few of the projects that we've been a part of, all of which were transformational for their civic community, and we're extremely excited to be a part of this one, the D. Hanks Amphitheater. Though I've been living in Chicago for 30 years, my home before Chicago was the great city of Washington. My parents, as Nick said, lived not far from here. I attended grade school at St. Patrick's, class of 1990, and furthered my Catholic education at Peoria Notre Dame across the river. On behalf of the entire team we have assembled here, we're incredibly excited to be with you here tonight to discuss this opportunity that is the D. Hanks Amphitheater. Next slide, please. When I first found out about this project, it immediately became most captivating. Having a chance to be a part of such a transformational development in one's hometown is really more than career defining. It's a passion project that commands unwavering attention. It's an opportunity for me and my firm to work with this incredible team, this incredible city, to deliver a project to our hometown of Washington. As you'll see in the forthcoming imagery, we have begun the conceptual effort of designing the amphitheater and the site. This initial effort wasn't done necessarily to finalize a design. The design is not yet complete, but to ensure that an amphitheater and the necessary site improvements were feasible for this location. The original ideas and design were then used as supporting material for an exhaustive market analysis led by globally recognized real estate development advisory firm Hunden Partners. It was through this exhaustive analysis that the idea of an amphitheater was not only verified as feasible, but would, and I quote, serve as a necessary asset to Central Illinois in attracting artists and tours to the Peoria market, end quote. This was further substantiated through interviews with ticketing platforms, promoters, and music event operators such as Live Nation, AEG Presents, and Oakview Group. After receiving this affirming validation, our team began evaluating design options and construction budget estimates. We're confident that this team will deliver to the City of Washington a marquee venue that will be recognized area-wide as a premier destination for live music events. And most notably, we will deliver on the vision and heartfelt love that benefactor Jim Hanks has for his late wife, Dee Hanks, whose love of music and live performance was the catalyst for this incredible vision for Washington. I'm now going to turn it over to Epstein's Architecture Design Director, Patrick Carrata, who will talk more about the design process for the D Amphitheater.
Thank you, Ed. All right, let me lower this. I'm about a foot shorter than he is. So it was a pleasure to work on this project just from the get-go. So what you see on the screen right now is essentially our visioning board. It's a collection of images that embodies our goals. And when we look at a project this value, whether you look at it from a cultural perspective or a community perspective, we like to dream big from the beginning. So we looked at the project from a micro scale, meaning we looked at the building itself and set goals for that. But we also looked at it from a macro scale, so from a 2,000-foot point of view. So what you see on the screen is some images that would depict kind of the environment underneath the covered canopy in the seating area. Some of our goals, whether now or in the future, of outdoor seating. And then we looked at or dreamt about how we could synergize with some of the things that are already happening in the community. That could be happening around the site itself. This is a rather large site. We could be looking at hosting community events nearby, having amenities for the community, whether it's a bike path or a children's play area. And then the vision for the future being this a sustainable site, but also having future development like potentially retail that supports more and more the local, let's call it microeconomy of this project. Next.
This is a couple of aerial views of the site. The largest one is looking eastward, so Route 24 would be on the left of the page, and then at the bottom would be Knopfsinger, which is kind of out of sight here. But the point of the slide is that we've been lucky to find a site where we're not going to disturb an existing development and be in an area where perhaps we're having to contend with some existing residential or commercial. So this gives us the best opportunity to create the best product and design as far as an amphitheater, so we can locate it, for example, in ways that are beneficial for it, and as far as solar orientation. For example, we don't want the sun setting and the performer's eyes, or aiming the band shell or the canopy towards an area and then blasting people with music. That would be terrible. Next slide. So this is an aerial rendering of the concept design, and you see it kind of has this fanning shape, and that has to do with acoustics. We have an amazing acoustical engineer on our team, which is a company called Arup. They've done a lot of work with us, and they've done a lot of work nationally and internationally. But the shape is formed by acoustics. And then kind of that football-shaped, semi-transparent object there is the canopy, and it would be covering some seating, and would also be covering the stage. And then just north of that football shape would be an ancillary building. We think it would be about 1.5 stories, maybe 2 stories. And that building would essentially carry, back of house functions that would be changing rooms or bathrooms, or things that would benefit, obviously, the operations and the artists that we're playing here. And we hope that it's not just artists, we also hope it could be community performing here. But I think that's to be discussed in the future. And then we have a vast amount of open area around the site, which we think is going to be fantastic, especially from an experiential standpoint, to be surrounded by a lot of greenery while you're at this venue. For a sense of scale, you can kind of use the parking spaces to give you an idea of scale, but we can obviously provide more information regarding that. Next. And this is a conceptual image of I'll call it the canopy in the distance. And as I mentioned, we're in the very early stages. But one of our goals is to have an iconic form to the shape of the canopy. And I tell my design team all the time that if you can kind of create the outline of a building with a couple of lines, you're on the right track to have something iconic. And that if you think about the Eiffel Tower or the Hancock, you can draw that with 3 or 4 lines, and you immediately know what that is. And we hope to have the same for this amphitheater. But we also hope to have a lot of outdoor seating areas, and we hope that families will be able to attend this. And as somebody who has 2 kids, it's always harder and harder to find activities that are within your budget. So we feel like we have a lot of opportunities to attract families, ticket holders, and then VIPs. And we have a whole ecosystem, financial ecosystem, to support this project. But generally, this is where we're at.
Thank you, Patrick. Would now like to invite Nick Leroy to come up from NTL Productions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Council, thanks for your time. I appreciate being here. Nick, I can't thank you enough for getting me involved in this very exciting project for the city of Washington and all of Central Illinois. As Nick mentioned earlier, I started doing this as a hobby 15 years ago, and it's evolved into a company that generates millions of dollars a year in sales, and we work with small theaters and clubs and amphitheaters and arenas all over Central Illinois and the Midwest. Primarily in Bloomington, Illinois, where I started booking the Castle Theater when they first opened 13 years ago, which is now one of the premier spots for live entertainment in Central Illinois. Also have worked with small jazz clubs and the Performing Arts Center there in Bloomington, Illinois, with indirectly with the city of Bloomington. along with doing events with the City of Normal and the Corn Crib Baseball Stadium on the north side. I want to speak directly to the existence of 5 Points and if there would be any competition, against one another. And the answer to that is strongly no. If anything, it will add to the offerings of 5 Points. And when you look at 5 Points capacity, we're looking at 1,100 capacity, give or take, I believe, indoor concert venue. Where the projection here would be a 5,000 person outdoor venue. And typically, obviously outdoor venues have seasons. You can't be doing an event in Central Illinois in the middle of January. So those dates are off the table, right? Primarily, say for instance, performing arts centers and theaters, their high season is the fall, winter, and the spring, not the summer. Most folks don't want to be in a dark club or theater at 7 p.m. on a beautiful sunny day in the summertime. They'd rather be outdoors, surrounded by nature, and enjoy a beautiful venue like that's proposed here with the D. Yanks Amphitheater. My goal always has been, and what I do in communities, is to create synergy. Synergy between existing businesses, new businesses, working closely with municipalities in hopes that we can figure a way out to work together and build on each other's strengths and help each other's weaknesses. For instance, a lot of acts that might come through and play the 5 Points, their goal as artists is to someday better their career and play bigger and bigger venues as their career projects. Now, if you have an event that sells out the 5 Points, then you might not ever see that act again if they continue to get stronger. However, you can retain them in the community if you have another place for them to play live. With the D Amphitheater coming and a major headliner comes, takes the stage, they can sell 5,000 tickets, that act isn't even an option for 5 Points financially. If an act can sell 5,000 tickets, then quite frankly, 5 Points can't afford them. The math doesn't make sense, right? However, all of those headlining groups always have opening acts, support acts on their tours, right? And when I work, that's what I do, is I work with the agents and the managers, and I put together the budgets of the shows, and I negotiate terms with those agents and representatives to essentially land that show and get that confirmed, so that we can then work on the marketing plans, marketing graphics, all the digital marketing plans and ticketing. Those local acts, the support acts, their goal is to come back into a market. If they're on tour with a major headliner and they're playing in front of 5,000 people, then their manager's goal is to get them back into that area within 3 to 6 months to capitalize on the people that they just played in front of that were captive, right? So what's a good way to do that? We need to go back to Washington. We just played a sold-out show at the D Amphitheater as an opening act. Where can we play? We don't want them to go to Peoria. We don't want them to go to the Castle Theater, right? You want them to go to 5 Points, and you want them to host a show there. While creating synergy with the 5 Points, the goal would be to have open communication, to share information, to share booking information, to share data, to share marketing points, and to also say, hey, I'm looking at a bluegrass band on May 23rd. Are you looking at any, we're looking at a similar band. Okay, let's not do that, because that would be cannibalizing our market, right? We want to make sure that if we are doing a show at the same time, that they're completely different genres and we're targeting different audiences. They can still survive at the same time. You can have shows in May at the Amp, you can have shows at 5 Points in the same night, and in the fall. There will be some overlap. But again, the goal is if we're talking together and staying in constant contact, that it can just be a benefit and we're working together and helping each other out. Again, building strong relationships with the talent is essential, and giving them an opportunity to come back to the community, whether it's they're coming back to headline the D or they're coming back to headline the 5 Points. We want them to think of Washington, Illinois as a tour stop when they're putting together their tours. Both with collaborative marketing, there's lots of ways, and I won't get into all of them, but the goal would be if the D opens that there's a big poster of all the upcoming shows at the 5 Points. Buy your tickets here and seasonal information. And vice versa. We'd want to lean on 5 Points to help us with some marketing efforts as well. Maybe have some signage in the bathrooms or in the hallways of what we have coming up for the season. And again, staying in contact with the powers that be is going to be very crucial. different media investments, and visibility, back to visibility. This is going to be video walls, I'm sure, projected for this, where you can work with local businesses on sponsorships. But we want to feature 5 Points entertainment options as well, while folks are captive in front of us and are aware of what's going to be coming to the community. Because you have to remember, 70% of concert goers are from 50 miles away or further from that venue. 30% are going to be local, 70% are going to be from 50 miles away or further, right? So we want them to say, hey, Washington's a great little community. We had a great hotel stay, we had a great breakfast at a local diner, we even got to catch a local boutique shopping and do some shopping while we're in town. Let's come back. Maybe it's not in July or August, maybe it's in October or November when they come back to 5 Points. And again, collaborative planning, I mentioned that. Again, constant contact. I get reached out to every day by, quite honestly, sometimes hundreds of agents with different opportunities. And a lot of times I pass along those opportunities to other venues and buyers where it makes more sense, where I might not have a place for that show, or the venues that I work with, it doesn't quite make sense. So now the 5 Points will have another person on their team looking out for their best interests as well. Expanding venues brings more entertainment, attracts more visitors, boosts revenue, and creates enjoyable experiences. That's what the D would do. It would create revenue for 5 Points, it would create revenue for the local businesses of Washington, and it would make it a world-class entertainment venue and stop in the Midwest. That's all I have. I appreciate your time once again. I'd like to bring up Kevin Graham from Terra Engineering Group.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Again, I'm Kevin Graham. I'm the Senior Landscape Architect Studio Leader for Terra Engineering. Terra Engineering, as many of you know, we've done a lot of projects with the city, recently Knopfsinger Road. But we also do a lot of larger civic projects. Those are the projects that I get to work on. Projects like the Peoria Riverfront, just completed Illinois Central, ICC's Central Campus courtyard. We do a lot of big type of projects like that, and I'm currently working at Ravinia Festival in Highland Park, the premier kind of outdoor amphitheater in the Midwest. It's great to capture the emotion, the commitment that Jim Hanks has presented here as an opportunity. But we don't just do that on the emotion and the love of coming back to my hometown. So therefore, as Patrick mentioned, as part of the project and how we approach a project like this is to really look at the true feasibility. How do we right size this? What's the appropriate mix and makeup for a project like this? Next slide. So as was mentioned, we brought in Hunden Partners. Hunden Partners has done hundreds of entertainment, sports, music concert venues around the country. And when we look at what is the influences on the viability, it's looking at, yes, the local market strengths, the site locations, and the existing venues in the surrounding areas that was just mentioned. But we're also looking at this, the demand for the performance, what all these aspects that we can draw into this. What are the industry and economics to validate this? Next slide. So return on our investment. When we look at and when Hunden looks at a project like this from a feasibility, it's recognizing that there is a preference for outdoor events, for getting out in nature and creating a experience. But it's also having flexible design in our projects that can serve multiple community functions.
the proximity to other entertainment, having quality equipment, and I think that's what we're looking at in this design to be able to provide as well, and it's that elevated experience that we can generate. Next. So kind of amphitheater design. What are some of the key factors that go into this? And the overall guest experience is really, really important. So creating a park-like environment, creating a wonderful experience from the time you come onto the site, as well as the entertainment that you're getting. Weather control is something that we can't control everything, but we can control some of the environmental factors that we're subject to. As Patrick mentioned, sun angle, wind, things like that. Very important. Overall accessibility and parking are very important as well, and adhering to reasonable costs and expectations. As part of this project, it was mentioned we engaged also another team member, Arab, not just from the acoustics of the building design, but looking at the overall surrounding community, the neighborhood, the regional aspect of what we're looking at here, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But how do we have sound attenuation, and how do we, orient the building, the facility properly to be a good neighbor? The accessibility and parking, Tara, we are very fortunate to have a wonderful traffic planning consultant team in our company that does a lot of large venue studies. So we did look at not only how will people get in, get out, what's the overall impact, and where will people come from. So all those things contributed to starting to form a site plan. Next slide. But what we found, and what Hunden found in the plan, was really some key recommendations, and that being that we needed to have ample parking, premium VIP seating, at least 20% of the seating be fixed seating, that's about 400, and then support amenities like concessions and permanent restrooms on site. The overall projection of what this facility, looking at the surrounding environment, competitive market, was for an overall capacity of 5,000 attendants, with 2,000 seated and 3,000 kind of general lawn admissions, where people can just bring that wonderful picnic basket and that bottle of wine, perhaps, and enjoy the lawn seating. Next. So as we are located in the kind of the upper area here of the community along Route 24, Nossinger right on this side. The city controls this property, which was one of the things that directed us to looking at this site. Residential, obviously, to the south, and farmland primarily to the upper east, north and east. Next. So we start looking at the site plan, and we start looking at this property. We focused on this upper corner that is in along Route 24, and then what would be potentially Wellington Extended. We're not proposing that to be done that way, but if it ever could be, would be in that northeast corner. With the orientation focusing northeast, parking off Nofsinger or access off of Nofsinger into the site, and then parking surrounding it done in a number of different ways that could be phased over time. But you need some paved parking, and whether that's gravel or pavement, those are all design aspects we're looking at currently. Obviously, ample stormwater management and creating a park-like setting, both from utilizing that from a buffer from Route 24, as well as creating that ambiance of what the site will become. Next. So again, this is just kind of focusing in on what we've kind of focused on is potentially a canopy, a square footage of about 11,000 square feet. Initial parking, more hard paved here. This could be on the north side or the western side, a little more unstructured. And actually, if I could bounce back to the last slide, I'm sorry, it was one thing I wanted to add to that. Part of this development that we're looking for this that we're talking about tonight is really just focusing on what's the theater part, the balance of the site, which is one of the questions. Is really open and an opportunity, I think, for the city to consider. Whether that's permanent green space or future development, that's not what we're focused on tonight. We're really just focused on how to site the theater. But I think it becomes a wonderful catalyst for future considerations that fit with the comp plan and gives the planning department and the city, the council, a great opportunity to consider. Now if we can advance forward, I'm sorry. One more. Overall, what we're looking at is about, in this area, about 15 acres of the overall development, and about parking spaces would be about, we could do upwards of about 1,700 parking. I think what the market study showed we need to be more in that 1,400 to 1,500 would be ample parking for this site. But the option or the idea is to have appropriate parking that can serve for multiple events. Next. So just in summary, and I'm not going to go through all these detailed items that are listed here. We looked at kind of the market revenue, expenses, and these are all the litany of items that our consultants' market analysis looked at, from expenses to opportunities. And really looking at, the alternate revenue, really this can be a real revenue generator, and that the revenues will outweigh the operational expenses really after the first initial year. So that's when you start this. It takes a little bit of ramp up, but after year one into year two, we start showing positive projections. The one question on how does this be operated, obviously there's different models, and I think what the market study showed was the best is really to outsource that and having professional management of the venue. Next. And I think with that, I now will turn it back over to Dennis, who's going to talk a little bit about the city infrastructure.
Thank you, Kevin. I would add that I'm not necessarily part of the team, but they did come to me to ask about some of the roadway infrastructure. In general, I think the days of a Walmart coming in and building all the infrastructure and need for a brand new road are kind of long gone. So kind of looking at the property itself, if you want to go to the next slide. So kind of looking at the property itself, for any type of development that the city would be looking to have on this property, there would be some kind of investment needed from the city. So looking at this kind of curving road that starts at the New Dallas here, and then kind of shifts its way around. Looking at those numbers, extending the water from its current existing location along Knopfsinger, and then expanding on the sanitary sewer to get it to that main back of house entranceway, we're sitting at right around $3.2 million. $500,000 around there would be for water and $500,000 in there for sanitary sewer. If we go to the next slide, this is just kind of breaking it a little bit further, of trying to end projects in kind of good locations. If we were to want to extend that project to the secondary parking lot there, giving both an ingress and an egress out of that parking lot. The water and the sanitary sewer would still remain the same because we do not need to extend at that point in time. But the total cost there would come up to about $3.5 million. And then if we go to the next slide, if the city was wanting to look to give it a secondary exit out onto Kruger Road, at that point in time, we would want to extend the water main to loop around and then tie into Kruger. The sanitary sewer would likely stay the same. So that would bring us to a total cost of about $6 million to do that option itself. So kind of ranging where the city might want to break it, depending on what kind of future development we might want to go into. There's the options of 3.2 to the back of house, 3.5 to the secondary entrance, or the secondary parking lot, or $6 million all the way to the Kruger Road. Doesn't all need to be done at one time. It could be done in phases. You can bring it to the parking lot right off the bat, and then bring it to Kruger once we get into that kind of year 4, year 5, where we have really built out and we are we're where we should be with all of the acts and stuff. So they'd asked me to just kind of rough some numbers together, and so kind of put those together fairly quickly, but kind of giving council a couple options if they want to fancy where that infrastructure participation level might be at.
Thank you, Dennis. Now ask Caleb Weiss from Core Construction to come up.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Caleb Weiss with Core Construction, Vice President, and just privileged to be the local company involved to bring expertise on the cost and schedule for this project. In Core Construction, obviously local, we have employees that live here, play here, so really excited for this project. But Core, actually, if you want to go to the next slide, we have grown out of Central Illinois to a national company all across the country, providing parks and amphitheater, performing arts buildings throughout the country. So not only are we a local company with investment in the community, but also bring national resources, and excited to be part of this project. Thanks.
Thank you, Caleb. And lastly, I'll be reading a statement sent to us by Rennie Atterbury, the board president of the Hengst Foundation. Good evening, my name is Rennie Atterbury. I serve as president of the Hengst Foundation Board of Directors. My message for you this evening is one of assurance. This bold endeavor will set new precedents in our area. The Hengst Foundation is a 501c3 and will be self-funded. We will build, manage, and operate this facility, placing no financial burden on the City of Washington. Our benefactor, Jim Hengst, has contributed funds for a feasibility study, and based on the positive results of that study, we are in the process of designing, engineering, and budgeting the project with Epstein, Terra Engineering, and Core Construction. Once the final budget is determined, we will endeavor to raise an endowment over and above that figure to ensure sustainability over time. Allow me to make clear that other than the investment in infrastructure, the City of Washington is not responsible for maintenance and/or management of the D. Hengst Amphitheater. Lastly, I want to give you every assurance that the Hengst Foundation founders and the forthcoming management, comprised of highly experienced professionals, are committed to the vision and long-term success of the D. Hengst Amphitheater. On behalf of the Board of Directors, the many local businesses who will benefit from a project of this scale, the young people whose lives will be impacted with knowledge, direction, and career opportunities, the performers who will create their page in history here, the audiences who will enjoy making lifelong memories at the D. Hengst Amphitheater, and the love of the arts past, present, and future, right here for decades to come, I ask for your unanimous support of approval this evening, giving us the green light to work forward on this most worthwhile project. We will get right to work pending the outcome of this meeting tonight. My sincere thanks to each of you for your consideration. Thank you very much. We're now here to answer any questions that might be posed.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Stevens?
could you share with us the names of the people who sit on the foundation board?
Nick, do you have those? I don't have any other than Rennie's.
Initially, Councilwoman, it is Rennie Atterbury, President, Leda Manier, Treasurer, and myself serving as Secretary for 1 year.
Thank you.
I think kind of exciting to see the presentation, and would open it up for any kind of questions for the A-team that's in front of you tonight. So if there's any questions. Mr. Brownfield.
Thank you. So would we bond the money? How would we fund this, whichever phase we go?
If council was in favor of moving forward with this, or at least us looking into it, I'm sure that me and John can kind of put our heads together and rough some ideas together. We've had a couple back and forth conversations a little bit on this, on whether bonding would be a good way, kind of projecting where that funding is coming for the bond. Would take a little bit of time, but that's definitely something that me and John can kind of look into, seeing how we could budget for it.
Okay. This is exciting to me. 2013, I was sworn in for my first term. Within the first few months, we purchased the 223 property. Had some plans or some potential development was going to happen, and we had that fun little windstorm that knocked us out for a couple of years. Things fell through. 2018, 2019, another opportunity had arose a little bit. COVID hit 2020, took us out again. We need an anchor in this spot to develop this property. My feeling is I'm in support of this project. I just feel like this is going to add to something that Washington doesn't have. This can bring the hotels, this can bring the restaurants, this can bring the other small businesses. You know, the biggest question we're getting now, how can we lower taxes? How can we fund all these projects? Well, without businesses, without things that can come with this, it's going to be a challenge. So, my opinion, I'd like to see, I don't know, I'd like to see what everybody else is thinking. I'm more on the 3.5 million. Figure out how we can do that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mayor, I would add, looking at the bond that we secured for the stormwater, I believe it's just over $100,000 per year per $1 million in bond. So if we're looking at a $3.2 or $3.5 million bond, that may be in the ballpark of a $400,000 a year payment.
Mayor?
Mr. Bundy.
I guess my initial reaction is a little bit of surprise, I guess. I'm not sure how any of us could step away tonight and say, yeah, absolutely move forward with this. Just because this is the first time in a public setting we've seen this information. And we haven't gone any through what I would call really due diligence of going through the feasibility study and the financial analysis that's in there. Just at first glance, I mean, again, we've seen tonight the marketing, what I'll call material. We've heard that, you know, it's feasible, but we haven't gone through and actually done the work to go through that ourselves and review all that information. So, I mean, just looking at a couple of things here kind of glare out to me. So I see, you know, like, you know, and let me preface this with, I think it's great to explore this opportunity. I think, you know, it's foolish not to explore it, but I think we need to do our homework. You know, if I was like look at, you know, venues on here and we talked about it doesn't compete with 5 Points and some things like that I just initially hear and capture. You know, I see Lee Greenwood on here. I walked in the 5 Points doors tonight. I saw Lee Greenwood here. You know, so I think we need to be cautious because I appreciate too that it's, you know, this would be a private company just like 5 Points is a private company, but we all know, you know, if times get tough, they come back to the city looking for money. And so I think we need to really go through the financial analysis in depth, the feasibility study in depth. And, you know, just like looking at something simple here like the seats. I'm kind of all over the place on the number of seats because I heard 2,000 was recommended. I look at the handout here, it says 700 seats and then 900 open air seats, so that's 1,600 seats. If I looked at the feasibility study, I see some different numbers in there. So again, I think we need to, I certainly would not be comfortable to say, hey, absolutely, let's march forward with this tonight. I mean, it just doesn't seem to make sense. I took a quick glance at some of the financials and looking at, you know, like the taxes that may come back to the city. I mean, if I run that through an MPV and look at, you know, what discount rate may be acceptable, I don't see it. So I may be missing things, and that's where I think we need to really walk through this and understand what would be, you know, signing up for. I certainly would want a lot more community feedback to get this out, you know, and say, hey, do you really want us to make this kind of investment with your tax dollars? Because again, I think if I go back and look at what our MPV might be on this type of investment, I think we need to be smart about saying, is that really the right thing for us? Is that what we want to invest in? So, like I said, for me tonight, I appreciate this. I'm glad to look at it. I really think we need to go into the depth of the details of it. And so I'd be looking forward to go through and kind of an exhaustive run through that feasibility study, ask a lot of questions about that before I would say, yeah, let's commit to this.
I can clear up the seating if that would be of help, just so that's a
I don't know if you need to. I mean, that's to me not an issue. To me, it's more about, I want a lot more, you know, community involvement in this and understand what the public really thinks in Washington. But then two, really go through in depth the feasibility study and ask questions about that. And then I think really calculate then too, looking at this for us as an investment, what is the city's return on this?
I would like to know that answer. Mr. Martin.
I would like to know the answer to that question that you were going to say.
The seating? It's 2,000 physical seats and room in the lawn for 3,000 additional. So we're looking at a 5,000 attendance venue.
Can I clarify something with the 2,000? Earlier somebody said 700 covered seats, but then I heard 400 fixed seats. So what is a fixed seat? Like how many seats are under the canopy?
Sure. It would be 2,000 physical seats. Right now the canopy coverage is currently designed at 11,000 square feet. That number may change just based on our actual design and engineering efforts. What an 11,000 square foot canopy would cover is about 700 of those 2,000 seats. The 400 number that was thrown out was the Hunden Partners recommendation that there be some kind of VIP experience for 400 attendees. That would probably be the closest seats and possibly something off to the side, some enhanced experience. But that doesn't affect the total number of physical seats of 2,000 and 3,000 lawn.
So 700 covered seats.
With an 11,000 square foot canopy option that we currently have proposed, that's what we're calculating. That number could change.
See, this is the other thing. Number one, I think having an amphitheater would be a great draw, just like we have a brew pub on the square was a great draw when they were brewing beer. So you need a niche to bring people to town. So the concept of an amphitheater is excellent. But again, the logistics and what, we just heard all these millions of dollars of the water rate study. It's just mind-boggling, all this money that we're really asking the taxpayers to foot the bill. I think it's great if all private developers wanted to do this. And how much is the value of the property that this amphitheater is gonna be sitting on? Like, the city owns a property, but should there have been a developer come forward and say, oh, we'd like to buy this property to put an amphitheater on there? How much would the city, what is the value of that acreage?
I don't have that figure.
Well, that's kind of a rhetorical question, but this is, again, these types of questions that, I think we need to explore, because I definitely, if this was totally 100% private, go for it. I mean, this is very exciting, but not on the taxpayers' backs at this time.
I think if you look at someone donating $12 million to the city of Washington, I don't think we worry about the cost of the property, that the sales tax that would be generated from this project.
We can't ever measure that because people say that, but we cannot see what sales tax is actually brought in. So that's a number that doesn't mean anything to me because we can never see if it actually comes to fruition.
Well, and Mayor, if I could, that's where I want to go through in the details here of that, because there is projection of sales tax that would come into the city, the county, and that's where I think it's worth us going through all that detail so we can understand that. Because again, I guess if we're kind of looking at the city's contribution and then what our potential return is, and then we can calculate all that and see if it's worth it or not.
Mr. McIntyre.
So I think this is a really outstanding opportunity for Washington to have this. I certainly don't want to miss it. I don't want us to sleep on this. I don't want to miss it. I would definitely not want us to, like Eureka or something, to somebody to get this. I think if like what was said, if we were going to do this as a city and we would have to foot the bill, the obvious answer would be no, that's not something we should do. But if it's totally free, that's a no-brainer. So then it really just comes down to like, where's the line that the city is willing to participate in this? And I think these roads, I think for sure the initial one, I think I would be good with. And if you take how much the value of this property as it is, and then you add, you think about, we put this infrastructure in there, let alone having this draw, but you have this draw, and then you think of then how much the total value of the rest of this property is. I think worst case scenario, that's a wash. If not, it increases the value pretty significantly. Having this here and then have this infrastructure. So I think it's a pretty solid investment. We'll recoup that eventually. But I guess I have a question of if we intend to sell off the rest of this land or if we tend to lease the rest of this land. I'm definitely ready to move forward to see, what are the numbers on funding this? What will that cost the city? How long will that be? And I'd like to see the final designs of what this is going to be. I definitely don't think we should miss on this.
For kind of example, something you mentioned about the infrastructure. If you look at that 223 acres without infrastructure on there, it's farmland. And if you look at Freedom Parkway, which everybody knows how wonderful that is. If this city had not had foresight to put infrastructure from Menards and Walmart to Cummings Lane, we would have never probably gotten a grant, because things have to be shovel ready. And without having infrastructure there, we started talking about Freedom Parkway 19 years ago. So we can talk till the cows come home about different projects and things. That this opportunity is before us tonight. A couple of you spoke, talked to the foundation, was given plenty of opportunities to ask questions about the feasibility study. Not sure anyone reached out to anyone. I think 2 or 3 elected officials did reach out to ask questions about the feasibility study. So need a little bit more input from the council.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McIntyre.
I appreciate it. It's just very exciting. Anyone out there sitting, I would hope you're just as kind of star-studded as we are. At least I am. I agree with Bobby. I think this is one of those once in a lifetime, but this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to bring something to the city that that could really improve a lot of opportunities. And I'm very cautious about investments, and I agree as well, Mr. Blundy, with wanting to know what our citizens have for input. But from my perspective, looking at this, and I agree, Bobby, I think you put that infrastructure on that, and it's kind of the concept of, you build it and they'll come. I agree. I don't see fronting the whole, $6 million to extend it all the way through. I think that's obviously an opportunity to see how well the venue would do and how future development would do in that area would then, prompt us to continue that. And obviously that would be another council's, desire in the future. And I agree. I think this is one of those things where, you don't want to drag your feet. And while I agree the risk is substantial, I think the reward is also substantial. And when I look at this type of project, I look at not only the financial revenue for the city, I don't look at just that portion. While it's very important, obviously we're up here deciding how taxes are funded and stuff like this. This is really an installation into our community, installation into several of our young children. I think it has a lot of great opportunity that we're missing in our area. The feasibility study, when I've gone through of it, does capitalize on that, so I appreciate that. And I do think that we continually look at what can bring people to Washington. What is the next step to step us over the line? What makes us more competitive? What brings in developers to not only enhance revenue from the business side of it, but what also brings people to live here. I'm not a national or born here Washingtonian. I chose to come to this community and live in this community, and I'm happy that I did. And I think this would only add to that value for several hundred other people. And so, while I understand the risk and I see a lot of it there, I do think that there's opportunity. And as many of you mentioned, Mr. Brownfield, we're looking at over a decade of that land and having it and having opportunity to do something. And I agree. From my perspective, and I would hope the people that I represent would want to see this as a good opportunity to move forward as well. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. In reference to that, I know people complain about their school tax bill every time you get tax bills in the spring, and then we have to pay the second installment in September. We got to remember there's 297 homes that were platted for that 223 acres at one time, and that was the reason the city was growing exponentially, and took the opportunity to buy that as a future development to actually slow down residential growth. And as Tim Gleason used to say, our city administrator, it's a blank canvas, and we've had a lot of opportunities and developers that have looked at that. I know the Peoria Economic Development Commission has looked several times, and every time they brought a project that they thought would fit on that 223 acres, great opportunities, because there wasn't any infrastructure there, we'd lose to other communities. So getting infrastructure there would be important. Anyone else? Mr. Butler.
Excuse me, I appreciate Mr. Brownfield's comments, especially about the vision that the council had in 2013, had relatively new, some new council members and some experienced, and I think that was a very, very good decision that was made in 2013. We basically took money out of reserves that was earning CD interest, and we bought approximately 223 acres of farmland, and the farm income has basically replaced the loss in interest on CDs. So, and we still own the property. We own 200. We have a fixed asset, and when the opportunity to get state and federal funding for the realignment of Nofsinger Road, that only happened because we were ready with a project because we had control of that property. We didn't have to get easements. We didn't have to buy the property. We were ready to go. And guess what? We have a intersection that's going to improve safety. It's going to improve traffic flow in the city. It's going to be opening hopefully by the end of the year. I think we'll have a ribbon cutting. And guess what? We still own the property. I mean, it was really a wise thing that we did. We've taken a lot of criticism by people who really sometimes don't understand all that goes on in the fact that cities need to have control of property in key areas to control their future. And we're at a point now, after 11 years, where we have an opportunity to really make this dream come true of a focal center for a community, and not more residential area. This is in the center of what's becoming, the center of population as more growth happens to the north. And we're not in a position tonight. We can't vote on anything. We can't approve $3.5 million tonight. But what we can do is let the foundation know that when the time comes, we're going to be in support. And I will be in support of the type of infrastructure spending, and I think the $3.5 million target that Dennis referred to, that's what I have in mind. But it's going to take vision. We're going to have to work together, but I think we need to let the foundation know that we're going to be in support, so that when the actual time comes to commit the funds, that we will do that. And as we continue to get more information, we'll know more and be more assured. But I'm in support of being there when the time comes, and supporting this project. It's going to be something for a city like we've never seen before.
Anyone else?
Mayor, down here.
Mr. Adams is here. I didn't know he was here tonight.
I was just waiting. Yeah. I agree. Excuse me. I think this is a great opportunity. We're going to have, excuse me, conversation here further down the agenda on tax levies. How do you keep the city portion of a tax bill low? Is you get sales tax, you get people into this community, spending dollars, make attractions, 5 Points, amphitheaters, wineries, restaurants, whether they brew beer or not, people are going to come and they're really going to want to, everybody's excited, So I think this is a great opportunity. I am with those here on the council that am ready to move forward when the time comes. I do agree with the lesser of the, 3 to 3.5 million. I think going much further than that, right up front would be a little too much initial investment, but you know what? Opportunities bring people, bring investment, bring sales tax, keep the city portion of our tax bill down. I think it's a great opportunity.
Okay, anyone else?
Mayor.
Mr. Blondie.
So I guess maybe a couple things on this. I guess I have a question for any of the council members who can answer this for me. What is our financial return on this? So we lay out $3.5 million. What is the taxpayer's financial return? Can you answer that? Okay. Please.
Well, I think,
you know, you,
And I'm looking for a dollar amount, like what is our return? Not just, you know, it's gonna generate revenue, or it's a good opportunity, it could boost this, it could boost that. We should have real numbers that we've gone through. I mean, we have this huge feasibility study in front of us, all kinds of numbers and data in there. And so everybody seems to be so sure that they wanna just jump on board with this, but I'm just asking the question, and again, I'm not saying I'm against it. I just don't understand how you guys have that kind of level of confidence without knowing exactly what a return is on it, so.
Well, may I answer?
Yeah.
Well, so we're like Alderman Butler said, we're not voting on this tonight. What we'd like to see is the numbers on funding cost and get an idea of this and you know what the final designs and numbers would be. But I mean, to be very simplistic, you know, you're paying $3 million for infrastructure and you're getting $15 million of value to the city. You don't do that, you get nothing. And then I can't give you the exact numbers, but it's something we should definitely look into. You have farmland, and what's the value of that? Versus we put in this infrastructure of $3.5 million, and you have an anchor there, amphitheater. Then what is that value of that property goes up because now it's commercial. That is like ready for somebody to go into right away. And you can look at the average commercial property, with infrastructure. So there should be a pretty significant increase to, like I said before, I think it's worst case scenario would be a wash in terms of just the value of the property you have now versus it just being farm ground.
So that's where I'm kind of getting at. I mean, you know, if I look at, you know, I guess I'll pick on the feasibility study, but in there, I mean, it's proposed that there would be $2.2 million of sales tax generated over a 10-year period. 1.6 million of that comes back to the city, 1.8 million of that's to the city, and then 400,000 to the county. But again, I mean, if you assume a $3.5 million investment, which is what it would be, right? I mean, we got to pony up $3.5 million to get 1.8 million back, and I'll say 2.2 million just to make it easy. So the county gets it. I mean, but if you do that, and you assume, you know, I was kind of researching, you know, for a government to invest in infrastructure, what kind of return should they look for? I found it says 3 to 7%, so I used 3%. And if you use those numbers with the projected taxes coming back, that NPV, I mean, it just doesn't work out. It's negative. So you know, I kind of looked at it the other way and said, well, okay, what would be that maximum contribution that the city should make to get 3% discount rate? It's 1.6 million. So again, when you look at the numbers, I mean, I get it could be a catalyst, and it could do all these if, and, buts, but I think that's something we should spend more time diving into, and I get it's, you know, something, if we could do this, we want to be on the go, I guess, to do it, but I just want to make sure that we really took a good financial look at this. We really know what we're getting ourselves committed into, because again, I mean, I'll pick on pipelines. Here we are, you know, we had an agreement with them, and then we did the bonding and all that, and they came back and said, hey, forgive the $600,000. I mean, those kind of things happen, and we look at like the revenue in that. I mean, again, this would be treated as a private corporation, just like Five Points, it's a private corporation. I don't know that we want to get involved with that where there's maybe not a return for us. And then I'd like to ask and understand the questions too of, in 10 years here that we project out, I mean, if it doesn't pan out, what are we going to do? We haven't talked about any of those types of questions of what do we do? And so I think we just need to, again, slow down, go through the details, and really have a strong consideration and appreciation, I guess, for the investment we use from the taxpayer money.
Mayor.
Mr. Butler.
Just in response to that, I don't think we should be looking at this as an ROI on just this particular project compared to the infrastructure investment. This is going to be spread over the entire value of the 223 acres in time. So you can't, I don't want to use the word speculation, but you're investing in the future of the city. And the payback is the value of life, the quality of life for the citizens. And I think we're doing something that is just going to just continue to expand and provide value, not only financial, but for students, for retirees, for just for everybody. And the same is true, and the mayor brought up the example of investing infrastructure along the corridor that is now Freedom Parkway. We didn't stop that because there was no ROI. We did that because we knew it was the best thing for the city. And I think at this point, for this property, the best thing to do is to start to get some infrastructure in there, because there's none right there. We have to get off dead center on it. And this is just a wonderful opportunity to do that. And I think this would be a great investment.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. I would also add to where this to me makes a lot of a different change. You know, we compared a little bit to Freedom Parkway and the investment made there. And that investment is connecting across private property that's not even owned by us. And when I look at return investment, and like Mr. Butler alluded to, when you look at just the amphitheater, that's perfectly fine. Over 10 years, that's one of these parcels of what this property could be. And I agree. I think that's where, if there's an opportunity for us to capitalize more than anything, and I think where Bobby really brings up the idea of a wash, is the fact that, all this, when I look at the one map where you take the amphitheater out and look at all the other ground that we own, that's where we find even more return on this investment, and that's where we capitalize as a city on future growth. And I don't want to speak for any of the other aldermen that have been in favor, but to me, I think that's what they're seeing that as well. You put that infrastructure in there and it opens our window quite a bit. And this is much different than any project that we've looked at in the past, specifically like Freedom Parkway, because we don't own ground on each side of Freedom Parkway. Here, we would own that. So this infrastructure is directly enhancing the life of the residents of Washington. And I think, there is, in lack of a better term, there's a bit of risk here. But again, I think that risk is paid out, because if you put the investment in it and you have land to operate, you get to decide what future businesses and economic development you want to see in that area. And I think that's where, in my opinion, we capitalize and really see our return on investment.
I think part of the issue here is we're so focused on the amphitheater. I shouldn't say the, it's actually the amphitheater. But if you continue to look at just that, I mean, here's an opportunity. Good Neighbor Days have never had a permanent site. Once this is erected, it would be wonderful to have the property right next door that the chamber could use for the event. It would be nice to have it by the bicentennial, but the opportunities of, I went to see REO Speedwagon in Bloomington. I ate dinner in Bloomington, close to the venue. It's hotels, restaurants, commercial retail, some housing. Just the opportunities are endless to try to stay focused on what's the return on investment. And you've seen the feasibility study of what it can do for us. And the $3.5 million when you bond it, Joni, I don't know if it's $350,000 or $400,000. What would be the debt service on that? If you look at that, I mean, that should be more manageable just from the first and second year easily. And so I think you got to be more open-minded and dream a little bit, and have faith in these people that did these studies. I mean, these people, they were paid a lot of money. I can tell you the foundation spent a lot of money on this feasibility study. This thing was not done overnight. 9 months, 10 months, I believe. Do you remember, Ed? How long was it?
It sounds right, Mayor.
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that just didn't happen overnight. They didn't dream it. They did all the comparisons with all the different venues in Ravinia, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Des Moines, Iowa. They looked at everything. So, I mean, this isn't something that just, arbitrarily they see if it sticks to the wall type thing. This is something that we have an opportunity to have Jim Hanks leave a legacy for his deceased wife, to give back to the community that he grew up in, educated in, And you know, he'll probably never come back here. He left here and never really came back until he got back involved in Eureka College. He ended up being on the board at Eureka College for 5 or 6 years, and just wanted to do something for Washington. After the tornado, that's all he talked about, was trying to do something good for the people of Washington. And even if this is built, he's telling me he would not even come back to the ribbon cutting. He has no desire to come back because his wife is gone. He lives in Marco Island, and he says that's where he wants to stay, but he wants obviously a video of the ribbon cutting and things if it does come to fruition. So, I mean, this is just a once in a lifetime opportunity. I can tell you when he hand wrote a $2 million check to the foundation to start it, that told me something. And then he offered us in another $10 million a couple of weeks ago, and I said, we haven't even talked to council to the level to see if we want to move forward with the project. Once that $10 million comes to the foundation, foundations can't give that back. So once he writes a $10 million check, that foundation, so that cannot be returned. So that's the type of commitment he wants to make. So, Ms. Smith, you haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, I see on the paper here that it says the 50C1C3 is pending. When will that be finalized? Does anyone know?
Councilwoman, could be any day. Bob Brown is waiting for what's called a determination letter from the IRS. Everything, cross everything, not every. And the $2 million, he was able to still get the benefit of the 501(c)(3) through that. The IRS has recognized us as a 501(c)(3), the Hanks Foundation.
Mayor.
Yes.
I think this could be an amazing venue for Washington and the surrounding communities. My only thought would be, I would have liked to have seen like a Q&A for the public, so maybe we could get more other people's opinions. I don't know if that would matter or not, but I just thought maybe the public could get more involved in this, but I think it'd be a great addition to Washington. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Mayor, can I just ask a couple more questions?
Mr. Blundy.
So, okay, we mentioned $3.5 million potentially for city costs, but if I look in the detail here, some of these key exclusions, it talks about land costs, offsite improvements, lead requirements, stormwater detention ponds, burn landscaping for roadside noise, and security fencing. Where would those costs fall then? Would that be to the city, or would that be part of the development project? Or the, I should say, foundation, I guess?
I think, sorry, I hit the green button. The costs, we're in the process of doing detailed, or we would be, we're not yet, into the detailed design. As we get into that, then those are our numbers that we need to kind of figure out. And really, as you design the venue, determine where that is, whether it's other partnerships, other fundraising, that's all part of what the foundation would then be looking at.
So
really
in
in that,
clear, if I was gonna ask it a different way, I guess,
Yeah.
are any of these key exclusions, would there be an aspect to the city for these?
I don't think the interpretation is right now that the city, as was mentioned, that the venue and that, depending upon what else is done with the rest of the land, some of that, discussion, I guess, has to happen, but, is it green space, is it developed land? All those things come into play there.
And then I guess, what is, I guess, the total projected cost right now?
That's what we're working within this dollar amount that has been discussed as being benefactor donated to design a venue within that budget.
what is that dollar amount? I mean, that's,
The 12 million, or right at.
so I guess, yeah, that's where I'm a little confused when I start digging into details here. I mean, if I look at the executive summary here that was prepared for Terry Engineering, I mean, it talks about the project cost. It says overall project cost, total hard and soft is 60 million. So where, I guess, where does that number come from?
That was different design, different studies, different design. And then it was came back that here's the money that we're looking to, it's a completely different venue.
So I guess, I mean, again, back to this feasibility study, that's my concern. We were given a feasibility study, we said, hey, go look through it, but then I look at stuff like that, and I'm not even, now I'm here, you know, it's not even, this isn't even the design we're talking about. So it makes me very uncomfortable to look at this feasibility study and not have a ton of questions. I mean, I actually prepared, I mean, I got pages of notes here of questions, because what I hear and then what I see when I go through the detail, it just doesn't all match up. And so that's why I'm very cautious to say, again, that's where I'm a little confounded, I guess, by my peers of how they can feel so strongly that we absolutely got to move forward with this, because we just don't have a complete picture here. In my
So I may be out of line on this, but the feasibility study is a what can this area handle? And so there was initial concept that was probably looked at by the Hengst Foundation, and when those grand plans, when those costs come in higher than what you're expecting, you begin to taper the look of the amphitheater itself, and you start to look at where some of that money, that $60 million is going, and then you get back to the actual nuts and bolts of the feasibility study, which is this city can handle this big of a theater, this many seats, this area, it's going to get that much sales tax, it's going to be that kind of thing. So I get where you're coming from with
why
if the
isn't
numbers
there
are
an
different.
executive summary of what's proposed?
Sir,
I'm just asking.
don't speak over. If I'm continuing to talk, please wait your turn. So as these feasibility studies are going, they're giving you the rough outline of where you're going, the path you're heading. What you're looking for is more of the phase 2 design. How do we get past feasibility, what is feasible, and into where you need to go? So what you have is the developer who is looking for direction to get further into the phase 2 work of it outside of phase 1.
But like the projections in here, the revenue and expense projections, all that, I guess, what is that based on? And is it based on the grand dream, or is it a scaled down version? What are we looking
It's based on attendance. So
which was based on the 5,000, right?
The 5,000, which is what we're still projecting and still designing for. So the recommendations from the Hunden report were for a 5,000 seat capacity lawn and fixed seat venue that could handle or draw this attendance. So that's what projected that.
But can I clarify on that? So that projected the $60 million?
So the 60 million is not a projection based on that report. Two separate things, right? When the initial thought was, hey, I like this kind of look, this kind of design structure, and we started projecting different things, and then started running those numbers. That's where you get that. That number doesn't impact the attendance. That doesn't impact the performa. So two separate things. And I think, from the city standpoint, further discussions, we could certainly have the Hunden folks, our partners here with us, to have more discussion on that and break that out for you. But really, those are two separate things.
So Mayor, I don't know, I'll stop here because I don't wear everybody out, but is there a plan to have this brought up again at another council meeting?
Yes, I mean, we can't vote tonight anyway, so we just want to try to give direction to the foundation and say we're interested to to hear more about it and move forward to the planning process and close some of the loops. Obviously, we'd have to work with the city attorney once we get direction to move forward to work with the foundation. Foundation attorney is Bob Brown, who's a Washington guy. So all that would come into play. You know, the $60 million, that was, part of that was the roof itself, the canopy. It was first drawn. I think Ed and his people drew that initially when Jim first brought it up. That was just a conceptual drawing, and that's where that figure came in, and then that kind of changed the look of the canopy, which saved a lot of money on that. So,
Mayor, can I just ask you one follow-up on that? I guess, so the next time this will be brought up, will the expectation be that we'll vote on it?
I think there's some more legwork needs to be done before we come to actual vote. I think we'll probably have something on the agenda in December for the committee of the whole to get further into the logistics of what's going to happen.
Okay, thanks.
So I think what we're hearing is the council, for the most part, is excited about the project and want to continue to move forward. Just need a little bit more information. Again, I think this is an opportunity that, you know, and I think comment about getting the public more involved. I think, you know, sometimes, you know, we're elected to sit at this table and make these decisions, and obviously just from the agenda, I had people trying to work in my yard on Sunday, and had a lot of people stop and excited about an amphitheater. Finally, my wife told me to get in the house because we had several people stop by. I had several text messages. A lot of people are excited about this project, so a lot of positives have come out of it, and again, a lot of questions still yet to be answered, but I think we're on the right path, and what a gift Jim Hanks is thinking about giving to the, and that replica of the square, it's actually from 1973, I believe. It's a picture of all four sides, and he actually has a train going around it. So he's got the land store, the Rexalls, Don's Pharmacy. He's got all the old buildings that were there, and it's supposed to be pretty cool, I guess. But see if that turns out to, maybe that would be another gift you could give to the Historical Society someday. But anyway, thanks for everybody that presented this evening, the audience that came to listen. Hopefully we can get this project moved forward even further and bring it to fruition. And this is something that probably would not be completed till 2026, probably. We're looking something like that.
That's correct.
Yeah, 2026. So a ways off, but might be worth waiting for. So thank you so much.
Okay. Mr. Blundy, if you have that many pages of questions, if you could let one of the staff members know so we can get those answered for you, that'd be great.
Okay, next discussion is the proposed Lodge Memorial Garden Cemetery, Glendale Cemetery, and I believe Brian has that, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you were here yet. You've been pretty quiet tonight.
Just listening. City staff was contacted by the Hood family, who are seeking to create a large-scale memorial similar to the historic one, or the ones in the historic part of the cemetery. They're looking at purchasing 96 graves in block 20 on the south side of the cemetery. The request does deviate from kind of our standard practice with headstones, but we've met with them a couple times, discussed with staff any maintenance concerns or concerns of any sort, and staff doesn't have any concerns at this time. Due to the nature of the request, we wanted to bring it in front of council just for any discussion. Again, it would be the sale of 96 graves at $780 a piece, which would be $74,880. And again, we've met with the family, we've discussed it at the staff level. and we have no concerns, and we do think it's a great opportunity for Glendale Cemetery, the city, and the Living family.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Stevens.
I think it's a fabulous idea because my husband and I already own property in Block 23. No, I think this is wonderful because the old part of the cemetery is gorgeous with the, you know, big monuments and everything like that. I think this is fabulous.
Attached is kind of the block and the different lots that will be sold, and kind of just a rough drawing of what they are thinking. Again, working with staff, we've talked over any maintenance concerns or stuff like that, and we don't see any of this.
And Brian, could you just explain a little bit what that type of revenue would do for resurfacing the streets and things within the cemetery as far as overlays and blacktop and things?
Yep, again, discussing with staff and stuff, you know we have 3 more roads to potentially install, or in between blocks 19 and 20, 20 and 21, and 21 and 22. Kind of just rough estimates, you know, that could be in the range of 30 to 40,000. It would take over probably a couple years. We would cut in the roads, gravel it, let it settle over a year or so, and then we would asphalt it. But yeah, that's revenue that could go towards that. It could go towards, you know, if we decide to build a building out there, it could go towards that. So it's just a nice chunk of revenue that could be used towards the cemetery.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is great. The family wants to do this, and I have no support, or I have no problem supporting it.
Anyone against moving forward with it? Everybody good? And it's about the first time we've agreed on anything for a while. So. On to item D. Thank you, Brian, so much for presenting. Joni Baxter with the 2024 tax levy discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seems like we just did this, but it's time again to look at the tax levy for 2024 that we will be acting on in December and will be filed with the county by December 24th. So first of all, just a little background on some notes to take about the tax levy. As usual, the largest share of the proposed tax levy is for the retirement and pension benefit costs. Over 68% is what we're estimating. And other levies, as you might recall from previous years, are what we call special levies for liability insurance, audit, emergency management, and then we also have levies in the past we've done for fire and ambulance and general corps. As a reminder, the city's share of the overall property tax that is paid is a fairly small amount. This year we're anticipating, based on the previous rates, that the city's share was approximately 6.04% of the total amount of property taxes paid. The schools, as you might expect, are the highest share, with the Washington High School, grade schools, and ICC making up about a little over 75% of the total property taxes paid. So the first step that is taken for this process is to look at our tentative total equalized assessed valuation, which we do get from the county. So Tazewell County provides us with that each year. For 2024, they're estimating $429,922,277 as the total tentative equalized assessed valuation. We do go through a process to adjust that because of board of review disputes. So we find that the final rate setting levy is typically lower than what we're given, or the rate setting valuation is lower. So we do adjust that just to kind of be conservative. This year, I'm adjusting that down to $428 million for that rate setting valuation. And comparing that to the previous year, which we do know the final EAV for 2023 of just over $394 million, equates to about an 8.55% increase in the EAV. And as you might recall, we had a similar increase last year. So just to kind of get some background as to, you know, what would be a factor in that increase, staff did reach out to April Morgan with the Township Assessor's Office and talked to her just a little bit about that, considering last year was the quadrennial reassessment. So there was a across the board increase due to that assessment that's done. But she did indicate really one of the main driving forces behind that is just the real estate market in general. And I'm sure that you've probably heard stories as well, but you know, just houses that are being purchased well over the asking price. And that in turn increases the value. And values are reviewed and equalized on a 3-year look-back period, so actually that's going to affect more than just the quadrennial reassessment, but into this current year, for example. So that has had the effect of actually increasing our EAV for the second year of over 8 to 9%. So just looking at some of the other funds that we need to raise money for, that includes the special funds I mentioned, as well as the police pension fund. Those this year require a net increase of $70,921. The additional $100,000, as you might recall from the previous year, that we did levy for the police pension fund, that's not being requested this year, so that kind of does free up that $100,000. And first thought is to, help to pay the increase in the fire and ambulance contract. Because as you might recall, the contract that was just approved just last month does increase the city's cost just over $300,000, about $307,000 over the previous year. So that is something that we are looking for ways to make sure that we can fund that for the next actually 3 to 5 years. In the previous years, we've had about $260,700 that was included in the tax levy for this contract. And then just to remind you, we will have an abatement ordinance because the stormwater management bond, we do abate those, and that does not go on the tax levy. It's instead paid by alternative revenue, which is the 0.5% home road sales tax. So you will note that we'll have an abatement ordinance for that in order that those are not put on the tax levy. So a couple of different options that we are showing. If you turn to the back page, or if you look at the last page on your screen. Again, just to review, there's the rate setting EAV 394, 272, 725, which was the final EAV for 2023. Again, Tazewell County has given us an estimate of 429, 922, 277, which is actually over a 9% increase. We're backing that down just for those potential border review reductions that does happen every year to 428 million. So that gives us an 8.55% increase in our EAV. That does equate to a little over 181,000 that is additional revenue due to that EAV, should we take full advantage of that. So the two scenarios that I'm showing here both do take full advantage of that, which staff is recommending that we should take advantage of that increase to the EAV and make sure that we're keeping up with that. As I mentioned, not only do we have the fire and ambulance contract increase, we also have down the pike here that 1% grocery tax that is going to be eliminated in January 2026. We've talked a little bit about that. We don't have a way to give an exact estimate of how much that will be. We're estimating just on rough figures around 500,000 that we could potentially lose from that. I saw, I think today, that City of Peoria is looking at possibly doing a 1% local tax to take the place of that. Again, we do have some time, but that's another thing that we want to keep in mind as we're looking at all the different ways to fund general fund activities especially. So again, if you look at the 2023 extension, that shows that final tax rate of 53.676 cents. And as I mentioned earlier, that equates to 6.04% of the taxes that were paid for 2023 that were paid in 2024. And then the blue to the right of that shows the first scenario, which is basically just keeping that tax rate unchanged. That means that someone who does not have an increase in their EAV, in the previous year that was done across the board. This year that's more based on individual assessments. But if someone does not have an increase in their EAV, then that they would not pay any additional taxes to the city of Washington. Again, reiterating, to the city of Washington, that's 6%. So we can't, predict what the schools and the other taxing bodies will do. That could potentially affect your total tax rate and the total taxes that you're paying. What we can say is that the first scenario would be projected to not increase that tax rate, assuming that we, are right on the EAV of $428 million. And as I mentioned, the police pension levy, that $100,000, which we talked about last year, that we did provide to the police pension board. That's something that we can consider on a year-by-year basis. They're not requesting it this year, so that kind of helps to free up those funds. Police pension increases $26,777. IMRF $99.75, and Social Security Medicare $19,986. That gives us actually a net decrease of $43,262. Again, because of that $100,000 that we can then target to other areas as needed. Slight increases in the liability and audit, and then we're basically down to fire and ambulance and general corp. So this scenario again shows the tax rate unchanged. The tax levy amount would increase by $181,053, which again, as I mentioned, that's what we can increase and still keep the rate the same. And we're able to put that amount, which I believe is $210,132. Because that $100,000 went down from police pension, and there were some other changes within, we're able to actually fund $210,132 of the total $307,000. That still has some, and again, keep in mind that prior to this, we are funding just over 25%. Okay, so our contract for fire and ambulance is being paid 25% by the levy, 75% by general fund, other general sources. That was before the increase. Now we have the $307,000 increase to deal with. This would allow for $210 of the $307 to be paid by the tax levy, and that would leave $932,000 coming from other general fund sources. Okay. The main difference with option 1 and option 2 is that I did another one just to see, okay, what if we put the entire increase, not the entire contract, the entire increase, which is the $307,000, and that would result in $278,275 increase. That would increase the tax rate to 55.9 cents. I just wanted you to be able to see what it would do if we put that full increase into the tax levy. That would increase the levy 13.15%, and if we keep the rate unchanged, it still obviously increases the levy itself, which is an 8.56% increase, which is equal to, there's some rounding there, but it's equal to that increase in EAV. So we're able to increase it, keep the tax rate the same, get the funds that were needed, and also able to kind of redirect those funds to fire and ambulance and help cover that additional cost. So as I mentioned earlier, staff is not recommending one or the other. We are recommending that we do take full advantage of that increase in the EAV to keep pace with where we should be based on what the assessed valuations are for the community. Any questions?
Any questions or thoughts?
Mayor?
Mr. Blundy.
So I get, of course, last year, I voted no for the 8.41% increase that we took. But I look at these two options that are proposed here. I mean, the 8.56 or the 13.1. I feel at some point, and I get the AVs are going up. But I mean, we're slowly, I believe, between us, the schools, and the other taxing districts here. I mean, we're eventually going to tax ourselves out, right? I mean, if you add up the 8.41% and say we did the 13% here, I mean, in 2 years, you're over 21%. You take the blue option there, I mean, you're 17%? I mean, so, honestly, I'm not in favor of either one of these. I mean, I'm gonna go back to my position from last year when we talked about this. I would prefer to keep it flat. I realize we've taken some increases with the fire contract and some things like that, but at some point, I think we gotta hit the relief valve and give people some relief. I'm sure the schools are gonna take 5%, they're gonna max themselves out. Why wouldn't they? I get that, they don't really have any other revenue streams. I believe we do have other options that we can consider, and I think, again, when we went into the budget season this year, we had $6 million into the budget. I voted no for that. I'll be looking for the same thing this year. I mean, where can we talk about what potential cuts we can make to offset some of these tax increases? And again, I think at some point, Washington's property taxes are going to become unrealistic for a lot of people. We'll probably see people wanting to get out of town. I know a lot of other communities are feeling that as well. But so to me, I'm in the range of 0, and I can maybe get my head around 5%, but I'm not. I mean, if 8.56 and 13.15 is what shows up, I would vote no for those.
Mayor, down here again.
Mr. Evans.
I'm throwing my voice tonight, you notice that?
It's hard to see with this new setup.
Yeah. I certainly don't think anybody likes raising taxes, right? But this keeps the tax rate the same, the rate the same. And I really think that, people need to look at what makes up this tax bill. I mean, Alderperson Blundy just talked about if between the city and the schools, we're not even in the same hemisphere as the schools. We get barely 2 times more than the library for the whole city. We're doing roads, we're doing infrastructure, we're doing water lines, sewer lines. I don't know where the money comes from. If we just had a thing that we talked about 2 items ago with an opportunity to, again, bring people in, to spend money, to gain potentially more sales tax. That's a way to eventually at some point put a stop on or lower the property tax rate. But you can't have it both ways. You can't say we don't want opportunity, but we also don't want, and we don't want to, again, this is keeping the tax rate the same. So if everybody's house value went up, hey, that's great for everybody that owns that house. But there's a little bit more tax that comes along with it. That's not something that the city is setting. So to me, I'm just confused with some of the talk on both sides. Where does the money come from then? We have all these projects that we want to do. Where does the money come from? And if you want to not increase the tax rate, I mean, again, if you had a $10,000 tax bill this year, the city part was 6% of that. So the city is not the problem. So I hope those on social media and everything else that have problems, don't get me wrong, I think that the tax bill is really high too. I hope those individuals are going to the school board meetings and trying to figure out, I mean, John had just mentioned, well, they'll raise it 5%, why wouldn't they? Well, exactly. Well, my question to them would be, why would you have to every single year? I mean, we can look for ways to save, so can they. So I don't have any issue with I don't want to go all the way up to the 13. I think that's a little egregious myself. I think if we take the EAV just on the basic increase and we keep our tax rate the same, that's what's the most important to me. So I would be in favor of, I guess, the blue category, option 1.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Stevens.
Okay, so I really liked this year that we had two choices, that were presented to us. This tax rate, I definitely like the choice where the tax rate stays the same. Because I'm gonna go back to when we became home rule, one of the big talking points was, we'll have the ability to raise money through sales tax and things like that. And that's where the city gets money that the schools don't get money from. And if you look at this chart that was provided, you can see how we did start going down and then we kind of went up and now, we're going up and now we're gonna stay steady. And I think the whole idea was our tax rate was supposed to go down. So given the two choices that we have, and again, the time frame isn't long to make any changes, the one where the tax rate stays the same is the one that I would be more comfortable with.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, just so I'm looking at this correctly and speaking correctly, Joni, if we were to move forward taking nothing, we would be, the same rate of 394, 272, 225, and just be completely missing out.
No, I mean, the EAV is what it is, so, I mean, our EAV is gonna be somewhere between 428 million that I'm projecting as a rate setting EAV, and the 429 it's still going to increase even if we don't take advantage of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's what I was under the impression of too. I just was making sure I was clear. So yeah, I again, it's a wonderful thing that our houses are worth more. It sucks when it comes to tax bill, and so I'm in support of the blue one. I think that we find ways to take care of the fire stuff, and the 13.5 or 13.15. Just I think if we can keep us at neutral, I think we're really not raising taxes. We're just taking advantage of the property increases, and I think that's a financial responsibility for us to keep pushing in through all these projects as costs continue to go up. So I would support the blue one at the 8.56.
Tax rate.
Mr. Brown.
Tax rate remains the same. The blue.
Mr. Butler.
We just, I can't, 2 or 3, whatever weeks ago with the fire contract, we made a major commitment. Any discussion about tax rates should have been made back then before we made that decision. You can't have it both ways. The fact is that the fire department serves almost the entire township, much of which is outside of the city, but Central Fire Protection District, Pleasant View Fire Protection District, they're subject to tax caps, which we're not. They can't help. We need to we bear the brunt of the increase in the fire country. Now it's time to pay for it, because if not, it comes out of the general fund. I mean, it's a shell game. Somebody trying to say, well, now I'm going to protect the citizens and not raise taxes. We really need to go for green if we want to do something responsibly, but nobody else is going to go for that. So at a minimum, it has to be the blue, and it's going to be, again, I'm going to be disappointed if anybody is not in agreement with that, because I just think they're taking advantage of saying they're trying to save money. We already spent the money. We spent it 3 weeks ago. Now it's time that we have to come up with the revenue, and we have, what's going to happen to water rates? We know they're going up. We're going to find that out in February. So we have to make a move like this at a minimum. The blue, which is 8.56, and I think we need to go higher, but I know there will be any other support, but that's a minimum.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Stevens.
Okay, it was mentioned about the fire department. Well, before we approved this last budget, that's when we should have added more money and it stayed the same. I mean, so we're kind of our worst enemy at this. We should have increased what we were giving to the fire department in the last budget, but nothing happened there.
Anyone else? So is blue what we want to go with? Everybody good? To think, you look at Fairview Heights, for example, one of my friends in IML, the mayor there, East Peoria, they levy nothing. And why is that? Because of their sales tax. They have so much sales tax that they don't need to levy a tax on the city. So, thinking about the project we heard tonight, that's something that would be nice down the road to get enough sales tax in return to not have to levy anything. If you vote against the levy, by the way, if the levy would fail, that means you get nothing. That means that $1.5 million, 1.5 is it?
2.2.
We get nothing. So if you vote no for nothing on the levy, it gets nothing. The other thing is this council is going to have to address the grocery tax to take a look at that, the $500,000. We have till, I believe, August to make that decision to make sure it doesn't have any interruption for the January 1, 2026. So that's something that will probably be in discussion during the budget process. It's always unfortunate. The high school was the same way when I served 8 years on the school board. You have to levy your tax before you do your budget, which is, I feel really backwards. And it's always a guessing game. You have to get with the county, the township assessor to see, what the projections are going to be. So it's kind of a shell game, but that's how it's always been. So appreciate the feedback tonight, Joni. Thank you for all this information you've provided for us, and appreciate it. Any other business?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Brownfield.
I want to share with everyone here the open meeting for the 5 Points Board of Directors, or financial meeting that will be held on November 27th at 7 a.m. here at 5 Points. So, Derek, do you want to add anything as far as concern about open meetings, or? I guess you can do mine.
I know. Sure, Alderman Brownfield. So this is a meeting of a private, not-for-profit corporation. Certain members of public bodies serve on that board, is my understanding. It's important if any member of this public body, the City Council, wishes to attend, to be mindful of Open Meetings Act considerations, which is just sit in the audience, don't have an interactive discussion with this private foundation.
Anything else?
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Stevens.
Okay, so tonight, I'd like to talk about the meeting room. Like, the committee of the whole agenda just said 5 Points banquet room. It didn't say banquet room A. And when I came around the corner, the door was shut and it said senior fitness class or something like that. It wasn't clearly marked that this was the city council meeting. So I hope in the future that's the case. And also, on the last planning and zoning commission meeting, I came here thinking the meeting was here, but it was at the fire station. So I was late to that. And that meeting was rescheduled and not moved to the regular December meeting. Are there agenda items that are sensitive, time sensitive, that need to be addressed before our next council meeting, or something to that effect?
All 4 of the items that we have on that agenda have public hearings associated with them, so they are all on time. They are all time sensitive. They will all come back here as first reading ordinances a week from this evening.
Okay, so that's the reason I went to the planning and zoning meeting, because a couple of the agenda items, they were unclear to me what they were. So you're telling me they're gonna be as a first reading when?
A week from tonight.
A week from tonight. So when are we gonna hear about what these are?
At the first reading.
Okay, so.
One of them is the short-term rental ordinance, which has been discussed twice. Another one is a rezoning, and 2 others are what I would classify as minor code amendments.
Okay, that's why I was confused, why they just didn't move the meeting to December, but whatever, thanks.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just want to say how awesome it is to hear everyone tonight. I really think this is it's a movement forward for the council, and it's great to see it happen.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Mayor,
Mr. Blundy.
I got two things I wanted to bring up tonight, but one, I was looking at, I got the invite from the Chamber of Commerce for the mayor's prayer breakfast. I was just curious why it's at the banquet facility versus 5 Points.
That's a chamber decision that they make. The contract, when was drawn up, part of the contract for the city was they could use this facility for the Washington Day banquet and the prayer breakfast. If they choose not to do that, that would be a chamber decision, not the city's.
Okay. Well, I think we should put a little more pressure on the chamber to consider using this free facility, because, you know, we approved for fiscal year 24-25 $20,000 to the chamber, and you know, it's specifically called down there that includes the mayor's prayer breakfast as one of those items, and so maybe, you know, that was an increase from last year. So again, if, you know, we do have a lot of projects looking at things where we can save some dollars, so maybe we can talk them into using this facility for free. The other item I had is, so back at the October 21st meeting, I had asked for a legal opinion kind of regarding the city administrator's residency requirement. So as we know, you know, in the ordinance, and I looked at the new one now because we've got the updated code out there, but under Division 5, Section 292, Item 2, it says, at the time of the appointment, the administrator need not be a resident of the city or the state, but during the tenure of office shall reside within the city. And so on August 19th, we signed a separation agreement with the city administrator, but it basically states that Snyder will agree to voluntarily end his employment with the city effective at the end of workday February 3rd, 2025. So I was looking to get clarity of if he's our city administrator, is he still obligated to follow the ordinance here that requires the residency?
Derek, you want to attempt that? Again, the council does not have any authority as an individual to ask for legal counsel. But Derek, I'll let you go ahead and address that.
Derek, before you do that, can I just respond to the mayor's comment there? So if you look at our rules of procedure, 6.11 calls about legal opinions. And so I'll just read the last line of that, but it says, any member of the city council may, for purposes of inquiry, request verbal opinion or advice on city legal matters directly from the city attorney during a council meeting.
We construe section 6.11 of the city council rules of procedure to address procedural matters in a council session. How many votes are required to approve a particular item in front of the council, whether it's a bare majority, a super majority. Our construction of section 6.11 of the rules of procedure, if there is a substantive legal matter, it is either the mayor, the city administrator, or a majority of council can ask for that legal opinion, not a single alderperson. At the meeting that you referenced, there was only one other council member that offered support for such a legal analysis to be conducted, and therefore no analysis was done.
So can I ask council here if there is two other members that would support Derek looking into that?
Anyone else?
Mayor?
Mr. Butler.
Yeah, I have just a couple of comments about this subject. The city administrators have residents here. They're required to because of their employment contract, not because of the ordinance. We had, I can think of examples where they started employment. I remember Jim Collada, he had a family to move, and and he wasn't here at the start of his employment. I don't know whether Mr. Snyder was or not. That's what determines the residency requirement. I mean, it's directed through the ordinance, but it's the contract that requires it. And he's no longer under contract, he's under a different agreement that supersedes that. You look, the ordinance also says, so I don't know whether the goal is to make him move back. I don't know what we're getting at here. Do we want him to move back to town? Or I don't get it, because powers and duties, section C, paragraph 4, the city administrator is required to attend all meetings of the city council. So where is he? He's not out there in the audience. I don't know what's going on here. What, are we supposed to force him to come back here and sit in the audience? It just goes on and on. This ordinance has nothing to do with his separation agreement. Anybody should know that who's been on the council for just a short amount of time. Mr. Snyder, I believe, left because he felt he was being harassed by some individuals. And he's gone, he's still being harassed. I don't know why this is a subject. There's some things that have gone on that just make my head spin, and this is rising to the top of the list. I have no idea what we're getting at here, and I think we need to let this go. We have an agreement. If we think we're going to say that we're not going to honor that agreement, that's crazy. We can't do that. So I have no idea what this is about.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Stevens?
I think what Alderperson Butler said really kind of hits the nail on the head. The contract that he was under was the contract he was under. Once that separation agreement came into play, then the separation agreement was what is in play. And I think Alderperson Butler, you expressed that well, and I think that's, I believe, the key. Oh, and I have one more question.
Yes.
Speaking about audience comments and past meetings, I think it was October 21st meeting, there was an older couple that came about the curve on Zinser. Was there a follow-up to that? You know, damage?
Yes, there has been.
Could you explain what happened? Like what was a follow-up?
Yeah, I can. I actually went out and met with him. I actually had the appointment with another person living on the street already scheduled for the next day. They had called me, so police chief and I went out. We took a look. Have a couple options. I think Public Works is going to take a look at a couple things. We've had one truck we know of that's gone down that police have made contact with after the fact, so they're just going to help monitor. And the sign is in a really bad spot, so I think that's going to get moved, or we're going to come up with Public Works and police are going to come up with something else.
So the whole deal is too that the trucks aren't even supposed to be there, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other business? If not, entertain a
There's one item.
Okay. Dennis?
With the new setups we have here, I believe Jeremy would like us to kind of hang out for 10 minutes to learn how to vote on these systems. I know it is 9:25, so
I'll be quick.
getting fairly late, but he would like to go through a round of voting, not necessarily during the active meeting, just afterwards once it closes out.
After we adjourn, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. McIntyre motion, second by Mr. Brownfield. Ed? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Now a lesson on how to vote.